Eye on Horror, the official podcast of iHorror.com. This is episode 114, otherwise known as season 6, episode 15. I am your host, James J. Edwards, and with me, as always, is your other host, Jacob Davison. How you doing, Jacob?
Exhausted. We're only 9 days into October, and already between screenings, haunts, and all kinds of stuff, there's so much happening. It is so crazy.
Yep. Also with us, as always, is your other host, John Correa. How you doing, Correa? Are you exhausted too?
Oh yeah, just like just keeping busy, not doing as many screenings or haunts I know as Jacob, but just it seems like every weekend there's something.
Let's dive right into it because we haven't talked in a while and we have a lot to talk about. The big release this week is The Exorcist Believer. Do you guys see this?
Oh, well, we're just going right into it.
Yeah, that we're ripping this Band-Aid off.
Jacob, you haven't seen it yet?
No, I mean, it just came out, and
Yeah.
I've been pretty swamped with Beyond Fest, so like I haven't had the chance to really be or do much else.
Yeah, we'll keep it spoilery free.
I mean, I do want to get to it, so yeah, avoid spoilers if possible.
We have to keep it spoiler free because there are some massive spoilers that you want to avoid. But it's pretty rough. I thought that it was the setup I thought was great. It's basically about these two little girls who go, not little girls, they're like maybe middle schoolers.
Preteens?
13,
No,
yeah.
they're teenager. Yeah, they're like 13, 14. And they go into the woods and they're missing they think they've been gone for just a couple hours, but they've been gone for 3 days. And they come back and they are possessed. And so, what do you do with a possession? You call an exorcist. The part about the little girls going into the woods and coming back, that I thought was great. But then once the exorcisms going down, it just gets really, really hokey, really, really fast. And Ellen Burstyn is in it, and she doesn't need to be. They could have done the movie without her, and it would have been. It's about 2 hours. They could have done the movie without her, and it would have been probably an hour 40 and it wouldn't have lost a thing. It's just complete fan service that Ellen Burstyn's there. She has very little actual impact on the movie. What do you think, Korea?
I was pretty into it until like the 1 hour mark, which is when Ellen Bernstein is brought back, and
the setup is pretty engaging. You're like, oh my god,
Yeah.
this is good. But then just
it my biggest thing is because and I'll talk about this a bit more with the other ones, is I saw 3 franchise entries this weekend between Exorcist, Pet Sematary, Bloodlines, and Saw X, and I found myself sitting there going, okay, why was this made? Why did this story need to be told? What about this is necessary for it? And the only thing with Exorcist Believer that I can think of is, well, we spent $400 million on the rights, and so now we have to make something. There's some really cool ideas that are happening in it that just aren't fully followed through. Like, first of all, it's a 2-person exorcism, which that's really cool. You can do some really cool stuff in there, and they have a few cool moments with that, but it never really finishes the line with it. Like it doesn't go that as hard as it could. There's too many moments in the movie where it's like, okay, you're doing this because this is what's expected from an Exorcist movie. Okay. Also, they did a new version of Tubular Bells as a montage hype music.
Oh geez,
I don't know how I feel about that. That was a choice.
It's weird because because like I said, it's a new version, and you're like, is that's Tubular Bells? It's like you don't realize it at first, and then the thing is with it is like you said, it's a 2-person exorcism, and
Possession.
One of the families, the family is like total Bible beater, fire and brimstone Christians, and the other
evangelicals. Yeah.
And the other is is more of an agnostic father, like a single father. So you get kind of the two sides of, and by the end, they're just throwing everything at the wall to see what'll stick. And that's kind of what the characters are doing anyway. They're like, all, okay, something has got to work. Let's just try all this stuff. And it gets a little convoluted.
It becomes Tower of Babel, the exorcism scene, because they do try to be like, first of all, Ellen Bernstein's character basically is just like, I'm not an exorcist, but I'm an expert about exorcism. She tells us that about 10 or 12 times. And they kind of try to do something where it's like, all right, we're going to try. It's like exorcisms from different cultures and stuff. But it really does become a Tower of Babel thing. What all I have to say is there was already a legacy sequel to The Exorcist where they brought back the character of Chris and Reagan and brought back the whole story of the original of the first movie and continued it really well. And it's called Exorcist the series. And just like, yeah, watch that. It's so good.
Let's move on. Let's hear about Pet Sematary Bloodlines.
Neither of you watched it?
No, I haven't gotten to that.
Oh boy, you guys know I don't like being negative, so I feel real bad this week. Pet Sematary Bloodlines is the origin story that we didn't ask for. It takes place in the 70s, and it kind of follows the story that Judd alludes to in both Pet Sematary movies about a guy coming back from Vietnam and not being right. And so you get young Judd. It's in the 70s. You got David Duchovny, you got Henry Thomas, you got Pam Grier. So the cast is really great, and it kind of works as like not only an origin story of like Judd being Judd, but also they do have an origin story of the cemetery itself, and almost nothing works in the movie. Because first of all, it's about young Judd, so it's his big first interaction with the Pet Sematary thing. And by the end of it, you can imagine that a lot of stuff goes down. A lot of people die, all this stuff. And then you're like, wait, if he went through all that in the 70s, why in the 90s or 2000s did he recommend this grieving father and give him the step by, that was always the thing in like the originals where it was like, why is Judd showing this guy step by step on how to bring back his kid? And like this movie just makes that look even dumber.
That's something, yeah. Even in the originals, you're like, he even says, dead is better.
But I'm going to show dead's better.
Yeah.
That is better.
But I'm going to show you how to do it this way. It's right, like, dude. Yeah, that's something that I've never gotten about Pet Sematary. It's like, dude, you should be keeping that secret to your grave. You shouldn't be.
But at the very least, in Pet Sematary and the 90s and the 2000s, with both of them, you like Judd enough that you're like, you kind of forgive him. You're like, oh man, he just kind of gave into the grief, right? Because both Pet Sematary is a meditation on grief. It's a meditation on bereavement, right? And this movie just isn't at all. Like, all three of the previous Pet Sematary movies were great meditations on grief, especially Pet Sematary 2. Fuck yeah, dude. Mary Lambert killed it with that one. But this one, like, it opens up with David Duchovny's character immediately burying his son, Timmy, who came back from Vietnam, in the Pet Sematary. So you don't see really any meditation on grief. Like, Timmy just immediately comes back as a vengeance zombie.
So you don't actually feel anything for Timmy because you didn't know him before like you did Gage. Yeah.
There's like some weird flashbacks later in the movie, but like I really wish they had Timmy come back alive, but like have massive PTSD and watch that effect happen on Judd, on Timmy's dad, and watch like this character get to the point where he has to be buried in the cemetery because, of PTSD and all that. So, like, really focus on that. But instead, no, it just becomes like a revenge zombie thing. And then they underuse Pam Grier hard. Like it. I wonder how much of this got changed in post and how much didn't. I'm not gonna try rumors, but it just kind of feels like, especially with there's suddenly like a lot of flashbacks at the end where it's like, was this supposed to be like an opening scene? Was this supposed to be earlier in the movie, but like you changed it for time? But yeah, dude, just that fundamental, like, not having, like, missing out on those themes that Pet Sematary is known for, and not really, and also making Judd even more ridiculous, and not a single fucking main accent. in the entire goddamn movie, which I get it. That happens a lot with King movies, but like, this is Pet Sematary. You're supposed to, your characters, when they say dead is better, it's supposed to be dad's better. Like, I get it. Sometimes some main accents sound like Foghorn Leghorn fucked a Kennedy, but like, come on, dude.
Let's kill off the trilogy. How was Saw X?
Yeah, I loved Saw X. I'm not even really that big of a Saw person, but even as a standalone, and oddly, since it's a prequel, it was a solid movie, and I love that. Yeah, like just to give a quick rundown, basically it's about Jigsaw, John Kramer, in between Saw and Saw 2. He's trying to find a treatment for his brain cancer, and he gets tricked into this grift fake procedure in Mexico. So this time it's personal. Although he says it's not personal, but it is personal.
It's not personal, but it's personal.
Yeah. And I really loved it because it really put Kramer and Amanda, played by Sydney Sweeney, in the spotlight, and it does really humanize them and kind of give their perspective. Plus, there's some really brutal traps, and it's nice that Jigsaw's up against some actually pretty reprehensible people.
I'm with Jacob in the boat of, yes, I've seen all the Saws, but I'm not that big of a Saw fan. They're fun,
Yeah.
but overall, I enjoy them, but I'm not, I really like this one. Of the three, I feel like the people behind Saw X knew we're making a Saw movie and we're going to make a damn good Saw movie because especially in the sequels, man, a lot of times, I should say, they got really bogged down with police procedurals, even though no one knew how to write a police procedural in some of those Saw sequels. And they also got really bogged down with the whole disciples of Kramer, of Jigsaw. And it was got real preachy. This one, it focuses more on the relationship between John Kramer and Amanda, and really humanizes their relationship and Kramer himself. And it was just really well done. And it didn't forget that it was a Saw movie at any moment. The traps were really fun. Yes, there is the na 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 big reveal twisty thing at the end, but it wasn't so egregious. They actually did a really decent job where it wasn't boom, boom, boom. Here's 20 different things that you didn't see before. They all around, it was really well made. And I really dug how it was a modern Saw, but it still kept the look and aesthetics of previous entries as well. So bravo on Saw X.
The other big thing that's come out, and not in theaters so much, but on Shudder, is VHS 85. You guys get to VHS 85 yet?
Oh yeah. In fact, I got to see VHS 85 on the big screen at Beyond Fest.
Awesome. What'd you think?
I loved it. I thought it was a solid entry, and I've seen every VHS movie, and I'm always interested in seeing new ones because, well, you never know what you're going to get.
This one, it's weird because it's been getting kind of skewered. People are not happy with it, and I actually was. I thought it was really good. The Scott Derrickson segment, it's called Dream Kill. First of all, you can totally tell it's Scott Derrickson because it has sinister Black Phone vibes written all over it. But it might be my favorite since the original VHS, actually. And also the one that I forget the guy's name, but the guy who did Wrong Turn. The remake of Wrong Turn. Yeah, him, Mike P. Nelson. He does one that is kind of split in two. And that one I think is really good as well. It's weird though, because it's the first segment that's not the wraparound, and it just kind of ends. And at first I'm like, what the fuck? This is my problem with VHS. They have good ideas that don't end, but then it comes back later and ends. Yeah. So don't get frustrated with his. But yeah, I thought that this was a pretty solid entry. It might be my second favorite after the first.
Yeah, it's always hard to gauge favorites, but I was also a big fan of Gigi Saul Guerrero's segment with the earthquake on Mexican television, and they go. I don't want to spoil. They go into the bowels of the city and stuff happens. And also Natasha Kermani, really like her segment Techno God, where it's basically like a one woman show about VR that goes way off the rails and gave me kind of Lawnmower Man vibes.
Yeah, it's cool, and it sticks to the 1985 aesthetic. In some cases, a little too hard. The one you mentioned about Mexico City earthquake, I actually looked it up, and that earthquake did happen.
Yeah. She talked about that at the Q&A.
Yeah, that's like a legit earthquake. Well, when it happened, because there's a specific date, it's like September 17th, 1985, and I'm like, I wonder if something that destructive. And sure enough, there was actually a real Mexico City earthquake on that time. So. What else has been going on? What have you been seeing? What else have you been seeing at Beyond Fest?
Oh, what haven't I been seeing at Beyond Fest? But no, no, I've been mostly been working Beyond Fest, but I have managed to see a lot of stuff, and it has been a hell of a great year. There's been a solid lineup. Well, in terms of the new stuff, big shout out to Joe Lynch's Suitable Flesh.
With Heather Graham.
Yeah, Heather Graham and Barbara Crampton.
Love Heather Graham. She's roller girl,
Have you seen Boogie Nights, Jay?
Once or twice.
But anyway, yeah, Suitable Flesh was great. I thought it was fantastic Lovecraft adaptation in line with the works of Stuart Gordon. So definitely check that out when you get the chance. And let's see what else. I got to see the Toxic Avenger reboot, remake, etc. with Peter Dinklage. And that shit was awesome.
I hear that someone said that it was basically they got permission to do a trauma movie, but with a Legendary Pictures budget. And
yeah, they did.
Nice. Like in every the humor and everything, it was there.
Yeah, no, it was very much in line with the kind of humor with trauma. Plenty of violence, some, but not as much nudity, but lots of gross out humor and slime and bodily fluids and what have yous. And yeah, Kevin Bacon and Elijah Wood are really good as the bad guys and are very much against type because Kevin Bacon's like this really stupid, like CEO, evil CEO, and Elijah Wood is basically doing his best Igor. Yeah, so I don't know what's coming out, but definitely check it out when you can. And also got to give a big shout out to you guys saw Terrified by Damien Rugna.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I saw his new movie When Evil Lurks, and it's just as, if not scarier than Terrified. Like, this is a masterclass in tension building and scares. Like, there was one particular scare that I think somebody fell out of their seat. They were so freaked out.
That's awesome.
Like, yeah, because basically it's about demonic possession and it's kind of like a plague, and it goes for it. Like it really does. And let's see. Oh, and I saw the new movie from Tyler McIntyre, It's a Wonderful Knife, which is another kind of horror classic movie mashup from Michael Kennedy. In this case, it's kind of Scream meets it meets It's a Wonderful Life, because it's about this girl who she's a final girl and she kills the killer, but her life takes a turn for the worse. So she wishes she was never born. So she sees what happens, what life would have been like if she hadn't been born and hadn't stopped the killer.
That's awesome. That is a great name too.
Yeah, and Justin Long is in it, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but he plays a real dickhead character, and he's got these veneers that I just can't stop thinking about because of just his inflection with them. It's fantastic.
Have you guys gotten around to the elevator game?
No, I haven't.
It is it's a movie. It's the elevator game is one of those creepy pastas, and it's kind of one of the ones that when you're hearing it or reading it, you're like, oh, come on, because it's one of those, get in the elevator, push 4, push 8, push 3, push 10, push 5, and you're like, what the hell? But this one is this movie. It's by Rebecca McKendry, directed by Rebecca McKendry, and written by her and her husband David. And it's kind of cool because it's about this like a YouTube show that like investigates ghost stories and legends and stuff. So they go to an elevator to a building where a girl disappeared as part of this playing this elevator game, and they play the elevator game in this building where this girl disappeared. And it's actually pretty creepy. It runs a little long, which is weird because I don't think it's a long movie. I think it's I don't think it's any more than 90 minutes. I could be wrong on that though. But so it does kind of stretch itself out a little bit. But it's actually pretty fun because this group, clearly this group goes in, plays the elevator game, and things go wrong with them playing the elevator game. The elevator game is real, as it turns out. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, it's on Shudder. If you like creepypasta movies.
Yeah, and I like Rebecca and David McKendry's work, so I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, I like my pasta creepy. So, also, I want to talk about a positive movie here. I was pretty negative this episode, not through my own doing. No, but have you guys seen No One Will Save You?
Yeah. Oh, that was fun.
Jay, you need to fire up your Hulu tonight and watch No One Will Save You. It's the new Brian Duffield movie, which we love Brian Duffield here.
Yeah.
We love Brian Duffield.
Well, that's another thing I was going to say. Going way back to VHS 85, our pal Nick Junkersfield shot he shot the one that Mike P. Nelson did because wrong turn. The guy he used his wrong turn. So it's now that you mentioned Brian Duffield and former guests. Anyway, continue.
Well, and Charlie Clouser did Saw X. So
look at this.
Friends of the podcast are killing it this month. But yeah, no, it's the new Brian Duffield movie, and it stars Caitlin Dever, and it's absolutely phenomenal. It's about this young woman who it's basically an alien, a home invasion, but with aliens. And so her home's getting bombarded with aliens, right? I don't want to spell it too much with it, but there's next to no dialogue in the movie. Which, if you know anything about Caitlin Dever, she's a book smart, and a bunch of other things. She's an amazing actress. So she carries that movie and just gets put through the ringer.
What's the reason for the no dialogue? Is she hearing impaired, or is it just that she's the only character, so there's no dialogue? Do you guys remember that Twilight Zone that's kind of like that with the old woman?
The invaders.
Yeah, the invade, and there's no dialogue in it until the very end. I don't want to spoil it, but
funny enough, Guillermo del Toro did that exact same comparison when he recommended the movie online.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And that's a very good comparison. It's kind of like that, but the aliens they're gray men. And so their faces look very typical, but they do some really cool stuff that I haven't seen anybody do with gray men before. So if Jay, I know you're really big into alien movies, you'll really enjoy this. It's classic look and design, but they take it into new different directions, which is really dope.
If they take it into a Bigfoot direction, I'm totally in.
There's a I can tell you this, there's something with big and there's something with feet with these aliens. So being cryptic, because
I'll check it out.
No, but they do a really good job of explaining why there's little to no dialogue, and it's very simple. It's just she's a complete shut-in due to life experience, and it's just extremely it hit too close to home, her going in there's scenes where she goes to the town, interacts with people, and it's the most cringe, awkward interactions, and nothing is said, but through body language everything is said. It's one of those where it's it's exactly that. It's no words are said, but so much story is said with how people interact with each other and what have you, and it's phenomenally done. It's absolutely just thrilling, some of the points, and the ending is just it's insane. Yeah, again, Caitlin Dever gets put through the fucking ringer both physically and emotionally all throughout it. So yeah, if fire up your Hulu, because No One Will Save You. It's another one of those 20th century films that went to Hulu, and so it's same quality as Prey, same quality as Hellraiser. It's awesome.
Cool, I'll fire it up. Another thing that I saw that isn't really horror, but it might be of interest, is The Creator. You guys see The Creator?
Yeah, I saw it in IMAX.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's I saw an IMAX as well. That's the only way to see it. It's
Oh
it's a
yeah.
spectacle movie. Visually, I loved it. It's just visually stunning. My issue with it is what it is. It's about basically a war between AI and people. And there are all these robots that they're more than just robots. They're like AI robots. They learn and they're almost human like. And my issue with it is that I didn't really care about any of the characters. The most human character in it is actually a robot. It's this little kid that the main character is played by Denzel Washington's son.
John David Washington.
John David Washington, yeah. And he's supposed to be out to find this weapon that the AI have developed that's supposed to end the war. And when he finds it, it's this little kid robot that basically it's a robot that will grow up and learn and develop and just has these superpowers. And the kid is the most human. I didn't care about any of the characters except the kid, and the kid is technically the bad guy, even though the alliances shift and it's hard to tell who is right and who's wrong in the movie. So I liked the ideas and I liked how it looked. I didn't care about any of the characters. What about you, Jacob?
Yeah, no, I felt it had similar issues. I mean, of course, stunning to look at, beautifully shot with some incredible special and practical effects. But yeah, the plot was a bit lacking, and yeah, the characters didn't really pop out as much. I mean, it was a fun kind of journey movie, even if it wasn't really that deep. But yeah, it could have been stronger, and it did hit a lot of sci-fi cliches. So yeah, it could have been routed better. But I am glad I saw it in IMAX, and it was very visually appealing.
Now let's bring out this episode's special guest. Today we're joined by Saw X cinematographer Nick Matthews. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me come on.
Well, thanks for being here. The question I always like to start off with is, how did you get your start?
Yeah, I grew up in a family that loved art and loved literature. I've got an older brother who studied flute performance and ended up going to Juilliard and studying Baroque flute. And my parents grew up, showing us all sorts of movies. They saw like Lawrence of Arabia and very early, like second or third grade, and that made a huge impression. But simultaneously, I also grew up in a home that was very fundamentalist, Christian, and conservative, and grew up in the South. And so a lot of media was censored, a lot of literature was censored. And so I kind of had to fight to watch any sort of like more macabre sort of cinema. But the Bible itself has a lot of like primal, dark kind of themes.
Bible's pretty metal.
Yeah, it's very metal. Yeah, there's a lot of blood. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of like, the themes of the book are very, they're steeped in violence. And so I think there's actually I would say in that sort of world, there's actually quite a bit of intrigue and familiarity with violence, much more so than like sexuality. So when I started just devouring movies and I was reading all like from very early and got into like Kafka and Hemingway and a bunch, Hawthorne and a bunch of other writers. Flannery O'Connor was a big influence. And then I started watching movies in high school, probably because of Lord of the Rings coming out, Gladiator, and some of these films. And then that was like the era where they were doing tons of behind the scenes. And, I think they're trying to figure out how to sell box DVD and sets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I started making films with friends in high school and doing that sort of a thing. And when Saw came out, I got just, it actually was something I was very excited to watch. And I really pressed and eventually rented it from Blockbuster. And, that was sort of my very beginning, like childhood interest in it. And then eventually I went to like a small Christian school, studied electronic media, I came to Los Angeles and did like an internship for a little bit on a film called Pete Smalls is Dead that has like Peter Dinklage, Steve Buscemi, Lena Headey, and Mark Boone Jr. A bunch of really interesting talent, and I got to see that and be a PA on that project. And then I ended up working at a religious organization for a few years, and kind of in the process, I lost my faith and also started shooting stuff on the side. And this was about 10 years ago, and I decided to give it a shot. I knew I would regret it if I didn't move to Los Angeles and try to work in the movies. I wanted to be a cinematographer, and I wanted to, be able to pursue that. So I had been shooting kind of since high school. I've been shooting and directing. And then in college, I sort of realized that I wanted to pursue cinematography. That's when I first discovered people like who Roger Deakins was and Emmanuel Lubezki and a bunch of these other, really heavy hitter sort of greats. And then just started reading, and I didn't go to a formal education for cinematography. I just started reading a bunch of things and shooting my own things, and, moved to LA, and it was just a very slow path of doing like jobs off Craigslist and Mandy and a bunch of other things, but I got really lucky. And
I remember those years.
yeah, I've done my share of like $300 a day, like Christian rap video or whatever you find on Craigslist, whatever I could make a little money to pay the bill,
That low budget music video that's like, hey, we couldn't afford a fog machine. Who vapes here? Who
exactly?
vapes?
Yeah.
You're. I was a grip during that time, so they were like, oh yeah, you're a grip. You vape. Come fill this room with fog. I'm like, no, I'll get nicotine poison. What? Are you
exactly.
Yeah. So, how did you get your start into doing cinematography for feature films?
Yeah. So because I had I'd gotten lucky in that I had, when I worked at this religious organization, we'd done a few like bigger, I'll just say who they are. I worked at the Creation Museum when they were starting to build the Ark Encounter. And so as a result, we were shooting some of their promotional material for the Ark Encounter, which, I completely disagree with the dogma and ideology of the places, but it's where I was at the time in my life. But it gave me the opportunity to shoot some stuff that was period, that had some bigger production value. And then every time we would rent gear, like at the time it was the Red MX and then the Red Epic, to shoot something for the Creation Museum, I would take it and go with one of the friends that I worked with there. And we would just go shoot our own short film or our own commercial projects. So I started assembling a reel doing that. When I moved to Los Angeles, I was very cautious about telling anyone I'd done any sort of religious work because I didn't want to be pigeonholed or associated with it. And I wanted to kind of make a new break and new start. So when I moved to LA, I had, my wife and I moved out here. We'd saved up a little money and didn't quite know how we were going to make it. And so in that process, I was applying to shoot features on Mandy and Craigslist. And I just knew I needed to get one in order to get more. And so the very first movie I did was I got something off of Mandy that was like an experimental horror film. It never actually came out as far as I know, but we did crazy stuff on it. We shot 30 naked extras for a cult scene dancing around, which smells terrible in the middle of the night. We did like a lot. Yeah, it was just kind of a crazy movie. It's the first time I started watching like Gaspar Noé and some of those sort of filmmakers, and like watched Suspiria before we made that. And so it really was just like, there was a bit of luck involved in getting that project. And then I was able to use that project in order to get another independent feature. I think I booked it like 3 or 4 months after that. So I actually got on a run for a little bit of doing a few like independent films, but it took me probably 6 or so years to do a movie that I was actually stood behind as an audience member and also as a filmmaker.
You said that you didn't have any formal training as a cinematographer. How did you learn it? Because we had Marcus Friedlander on a while back, and we were talking about film school. And he said that the most important thing in film school is to learn storytelling, because you can learn the mechanics and the technical stuff from like YouTube. How did you learn all of the mechanics and technical stuff?
Yeah, it's because I'm very much a product of the digital cinema era. Like I didn't shoot anything on film until like probably 3 years ago. Most of my work started as a result of digital cinema. So handy, I started with camcorders, then like three CCD like cameras, which were like the old Ikegami cameras, and then eventually like started shooting on like the DVX100, XL1. So it really was like as camera technology came out, because of the spheres of influence I was in, I had access to a lot of those cameras. And so I would take them and I would learn them. And then I shot shorts in college. I shot shorts, throughout that sort of period. And I would use those experiences of shooting to try and, every time you would shoot something, you would light it and you would try to figure out how to use. So it really was kind of piece by piece. It's like I started off with, an Airy kit that had like 300 watt, Fresnels in it, and 650, like the tweenie, like the two tweenies and your 300, and then you would figure out, well, what if I use diffusion? Oops, I put it against the barn doors and I melted it onto them because I didn't understand that the gel doesn't go directly on the,
Done it.
to the light. So it was like a very hands-on, very like, almost if you think like a videographer. I was just doing it myself, and I got the opportunity to be on a few bigger sets, but it really was like, piece by piece. And then it's like, eventually you have enough money or a project where it's, oh, we can shoot on the Red MX with a set of super speeds, and we're using lights to actually light this project. And so I was, in that era, it's like, oh, I'm just know how to use Kinos. And I was like, okay, like we'll use like these lights called Vista beams, and we'll use as our punchy source and all this sort of stuff, because I didn't know how to run power more than like 20 amps at a time. Right. So it really was like every project that I did was like, I want to try to figure out a way to do something new, and every project kind of gave me a new opportunity or capacity. And luckily, because of the arena, because of having access to gear, because of having access to some resources, I was able to sort of do that sequentially. And then I remember when DSLRs came out, and I was just like, holy shit, this changed everything. Like we could create very heightened cinematic images with small cameras. And sure, there were some, the 5D wasn't perfect and the 7D wasn't perfect, but it opened the door for a lot of prosumer videographers to make very cinematic images. So I think, I would say that David Mullen's Red user thread was extremely valuable. Roger Deakins has a forum that's available online, very extremely valuable. There's a number of books that I could recommend that, became a big part of my understanding. And I would say stuff like The Visual Story by Bruce Block is like a really pivotal book, and it really was. Also at the same time, I was watching movies and reading literature and listening to DVD commentaries like nonstop. And you actually do just learn a lot by hearing the stories people tell, by hearing how they think about filmmaking. It's felt like, I've been doing this professionally. I've been working as a cinematographer for 10 years. And I think every single one of those years I've been learning. And before that, even just to have enough of a reel to go out there and say, I'm a cinematographer. It was a real process to learn along the way. So there have been a lot of moments where I was confused and didn't know what something did. And you ask questions, and then you rent it and you try it on set, and you're like, okay, an M40 is not as bright as I thought it was, or whatever, and then you realize, oh, I did need an 18K. And, but it has been very gradual. I've only even just recently I joined the union on the last movie I did. And
congrats.
I've only used Condors and 18Ks on probably 3 projects of, many, many, many. So it really is like a process, and you don't always have the budget to do everything you want. And then there are times where you're like, I don't know how to light 200 yards and a mansion at the same time without a Condor,
How is the transition to film from digital? Because film is it's a different kinds of shooting. It's a completely different animal. How did you make that transition?
Yeah, so I want to do more of it. I've only shot 2 projects on 16 millimeter. And both of those have come through a friend, where the first one, you kind of have to take this approach of no one's going to hand anything to you in this industry. So I sort of have always taken this mindset of if there's something you want to do, you need to do it first, and then somebody might be willing to pay you to do it. So one of those choices was there was a music video that a friend wanted to do. And, we didn't have a huge budget because it was an alternative rock band and, very Nine Inch Nails sort of Cronenberg sort of concept. And we were just like 16 millimeter feels right for this. So he and I both decided, let's toss our rate in. We won't make anything on this and we'll just shoot it on film. And we did that as a way to create a piece that, gave us the bargaining tool to say, I can shoot this project on film for the future. The process of doing it was very exciting for me. I'm I'm very used to digital. I'm very used to the way the digital underexposes, but I've also shot 35 millimeter stills and, I've been using a light meter for years. I don't lean on my light meter because false color is so good and monitoring so good. And there's so much that I don't necessarily need a light meter for, but learning to be able to say, okay, like I'm going to respect what the negative gives me and I'm going to meter at a certain stop and then I'm going to light to that. It was fun to sort of scientifically be like, everything's 2 stops under, and everything's going to live in this kind of darker space for a specific grain. And it was scary in the sense that like we didn't have the money to go and test before we shot. So I was making decisions based off of limited information. And then the next time I got to do it, I felt a little more comfortable and it was still the same process of like letting go. I think there's an advantage to shooting in a way where you don't have immediate feedback. It allows you to let go a little because you don't know that. And sure, you're anxious. I was anxious at night, but then you get the scans back and it's sort of this beautiful thing where they just actually look so much better than you envisioned they would. And that was my experience both times was like, oh my God, this just does what I want it to do and looks the way I want it to look.
Yeah, shooting on film is nerve-wracking because you don't get the immediate feedback. And like you said, it's almost like science. You have to measure out the focal, and light meters, but it looks so beautiful when it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just it's frustrating because, in the end of the day, it's like almost everything I shoot, I want the digital work to feel more like film. And I'm always looking for ways to sort of rip the image apart and make it more textural and sort of have it be something that doesn't feel so clean and, sort of like where you feel the zeros and ones of digital. So film, I love the poetry of it. I love that it does feel like, it feels like something you could pick up and hold in your hand. There's like, just like a textural quality to it. And the way it reads colors, the way that highlights roll off and sort of bloom in film. And those are things that with the right colorist, you can do a lot to get you very close to that kind of feel, but it's just, it's just not quite the same. I've yet to do anything long form on film. Almost every project, it's just not a financial possibility. Or that doesn't work for the style. The last 4 films I've shot have been 2 cameras for almost every setup, and that's just a lot of film to burn.
And also, unless you're Scorsese or Tarantino, like you said, the budget's not there. It's much more expensive to shoot on film.
Yeah, it's just you have to take in those upfront development and like processing and purchasing costs. And for some people it's totally worth it and they're able, that's worth what it means in the budget. And for most films, it's just not a possibility.
I'm just thinking of those early Apatow comedies where they would have 2 camera, multi-cameras going and then doing all that improv. And it was all on film too. And it's just like, Jesus, how many feet of film did you go through on that? Just with the multiple takes and everything.
Yeah, totally.
Insane. You've had a great year because not only did Saw X come out, but Spoonful of Sugar as well. That hit Shudder this year. Actually, I think we were going to get you on the show when that first came out, but schedules didn't line up. But so tell me, what was the because Spoonful of Sugar visually is very different from Saw. And I really want to get into Saw, but Spoonful of Sugar, there's the contrast, the colors, everything, and the visuals with it. Can you walk us through a bit of your processing ideas with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Spoonful of Sugar was it's made for Shudder. Their films tend to have like a fairly limited budget, and so you have to make something that works within the confines of that sort of budget. I got brought onto Spoonful of Sugar. It was sort of happenstance and very exciting happenstance. I was friends with a producer um, that works at Vanishing Angle, this person named Natalie Metzger, and she was involved with Thunder Road and a bunch of other really tremendous independent films. And I had reached out to her just to reconnect, and she was actually starting prep on Spoonful of Sugar. And at the time, originally Oren Sofer was supposed to shoot it, but Oren had booked the creator. And so Oren went off to shoot the creator. And I met Mercedes Bryce Morgan, the director of Spoonful of Sugar, right around that time. And we just hit it off right away. We actually just we just shot another movie in Georgia earlier this year. And it was, we jumped budgets and did like a $5 million erotic horror thriller. So, and we took a lot of what we did on Spoonful of Sugar and brought it to the table on that film. So Spoonful of Sugar is a film that because it's psychedelic, because it deals with LSD, because it's, sort of a babysitter kind of a film. It plays with a lot of the tropes of those kinds of movies. And we wanted the visual language to essentially go from realism into magical realism. So it moves from realism to surrealism. And the movie kind of starts with these very like bright, more lush kind of tones. And there's, we're using much more fairy tale kind of imagery. So there's a lot of haze. There's a lot of shafts of light. We're using, mixed color palettes, but it's much more subtle than like something like Saw, which is much grittier and more, maybe more pronounced. The looks in this movie are much more elegant and more painterly, I would say. And so we were using, we still played with shutter speed and frame rate. We're still doing stuff where we're playing with that for some of the LSD sequences. We're still using Vaseline on the lenses to play with creating like a different tonal sort of like approach to scenes. We're doing a lot with macro lenses where we're shooting like eyes and lips, and it's sort of creating this kind of like this sort of cadence and rhythm to the photography. And then also, for something like Spoonful of Sugar, I had a grip and electric team of 3 people, and I had one of my swing would jump when we would finish shooting a scene or a shot. I'd finish lighting and then my swing would jump in, and we used an Alexa Mini with super speeds as our A camera. And then I had a Blackmagic 6K like pocket camera with like old Nikon lenses that we used as a B camera. And so we actually mixed those cameras quite a bit for that movie. And it's just, it's very like visually, it's very painterly, and it's a different kind of horror. It's, it's much more about erotic tension and building the erotic tension. We use a lot of lavender in that movie. It was based off of there's this French photographer whose name is escaping me right now, but he had this collection called Ensemble, and it was like these night work shots. Crewdson was obviously a reference, but we pulled the lavender from that photographer, and we were like, we haven't seen a movie that plays with lavender moonlight, lavender night tones. And, it's usually like blue or much more like cyan or like steel blue. And we wanted to play with like magenta, like lavender kind of, tones. And then we also played a lot with amber. And so we were using amber and lavender throughout the movie and playing with those tonal spaces. And we pulled the saturation back on a lot of these sort of pieces. So, the photography for that movie, similar to the costume design and sort of the actual aesthetic of the place, because it's essentially a one location, not quite, but, it's like a horror film set in a beautiful house. And that home we shot in was actually all made of old redwood and just really gorgeous. So we were able to do these like very like Renaissance or old like shafts of light, Rembrandt sort of like poking into the darkness. There's still darkness. There's still, there's some staples to the work that I do, and it's like playing with shadow, playing with darkness, playing with contrast, trying to develop some sort of visual arc or some sort of color arc through the movie. So, yeah, that's just a few pieces of kind of like about Spoonful of Sugar. And it was a lot of fun and it was well received. And I can't wait for people to see the next movie that Mercedes and I did, because we shot it anamorphic. We just had a bigger budget to play with. And so we took those tonal choices that we made on Spoonful of Sugar and we're like, let's take this to the next level and let's play and let's go big. So,
fuck yeah. I'm excited because Spoonful of Sugar was very visually like appealing, like across the board. So
thank you so much.
Always happy to hear when people do something really good and they're like, we got more of a budget this time, so we're gonna go next level. I'm like, I can't wait to see what that looks like.
Yeah, it's a really fun movie. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm just hearing great things, and it was really fun to shoot. So
yeah. Now visually on the spectrum. On the other side, Saw X, which is very realistic, very gritty, has a very dirty look to it, but it also has a very established look to it. It has a very established style of filmmaking, editing, all this stuff. And with Saw X, you guys were all around, I'd say, like from the script to the editing to cinematography, everything. You guys were able to like take what's been done before, replicate, but also modernize it and put your own spin on it. So what was very well too. I was very happy with Saw X. What was that like, taking on something with that type of legacy and that type of established aesthetic while also trying to put your own kind of spin on it?
I actually wanted to ask about that too, because you had said that Saw was one of the movies that you kind of lobbied to let your family let you watch. Did you approach it as a fan so you knew the history? So now answer Korea's question.
Yeah, totally.
It's kind of the same question, but
yeah, totally. I think, I was not a super fan in the sense that like I kept up with the franchise throughout its entire sort of the process of like every movie coming out. I watched Saw in high school, and then I saw 2 and 3 after that. I think I went to college and then started just like watching a bunch of different kinds of films, everything from Tarkovsky to Evil Dead and all that. So I think because it was very formative for me, though, it was something I really cared about. And I remembered why I loved it the very first time I saw it. And I hadn't really revisited any of the Saw films until I booked the job. So when the script came my way, it came through my feature representative, and he was just like, I think I've got something you'll be really interested in. It's the next Saw movie. And I was like, oh, fuck yes. And so I read the script, and I was actually just like, this is the best script of the franchise of what I had seen. And I'd only seen 1 through 3. Yeah. And I was just like, this is a fantastic script. It's got Tobin Bell like front and center, because John Kramer is front and center, and the emotional story of John Kramer is front and center. I felt like there were fantastic twists in the film, and not, it's the sort of film that didn't just have one twist and then it's game over. Because at the end of the day, we always knew one of the early first act twists was going to be spoiled by the trailer, which, is frustrating at the end of the day, because you want people to experience something for the first time but everyone knows going into a Saw movie, at some point, people are going to end up in traps. So, there's a certain expectation. I read the script, and then I interviewed for the job 5 hours after that. So I didn't have a lot of time to process how I felt, to put together a lookbook, anything like that. But I did get to see Kevin Gert's lookbook, and I got a sense of what he saw as. And so much of what our initial conversations about the movie came from a place of, what do we love about Saw? What do we love about the early films? And Kevin was like, watch 1, 2, 3, and 6. And those will be what we use as a basis for what we make in Saw X. We knew it was set between Saw 1 and Saw 2. So that immediately meant, for me, I wanted this film to feel like you could put Saw 1 on, then you could immediately turn and watch this movie, and then immediately turn and watch Saw 2, and not feel like somehow you've departed completely from the world of these movies. Right. So as much as, I know that fans were not a big fan of Jigsaw, fans were not huge fans of Spiral. Worked for some people, it didn't for a lot. I didn't watch either of those movies before I shot this film because I didn't want to be influenced by the decisions that they'd made. I did watch them after we shot the movie, and I have seen them since. And, those movies decided to shoot anamorphic, or at least in a CinemaScope sort of aspect ratio. They're a much more modern look. They're much cleaner. They're more precise in some ways. What Kevin and I were interested in and what we talked about and what we loved the giallo color palettes of the early films. I mean, Billy's basically lifted from Deep Red. Like Billy is, very much from the giallo world. And while giallo films don't all like connect with me or click with me, Suspiria and Deep Red and some of these films, they all have these big moments and they're so expressionistic with lighting and with the camera. So we wanted to return to this sort of giallo color palette. In the early 2000s, it was very much driven by the DI and the color grade. We wanted to do it with lighting, and we still, of course, color corrected the film, but it was more for matching purposes and less for like, let's go green, let's go blue, and I think some of the early Saw films feel somewhat monochromatic.
Yeah.
It's like we're in the original bathroom and it's blue and there's nothing, or we're in the this sort of like the trap house and it's yellow, it's ochre yellow. And so I wanted to kind of take some of those colors they played with in a very monochromatic sense, and I wanted to blend them and use color separation to still have primary colors, but then play with some of those other colors in the background as lights turn on and, or as traps turn on and shut off in the movie. I wanted us to sort of have lights turn on and shut off to kind of connect with what the traps are doing, as though John built these things on circuit timers. He's very theatrical. He creates these traps that individually speak to everyone's morality and their own choices. And so I think we get a lot of leeway with the lighting. I mean, he's wearing a robe, he's got these big decisions he's already made. So I think I just wanted it to also live with the tech of early 2000s. So no LED. We used LED, but we didn't treat it as LED. We treated everything, every light you see inside the main game space in this movie is a LED light that I have complete control over on a digital console, but it's all put inside of industrial fixtures and housings. So I wanted to return to the industrial feel and look of the original Saws. From a design perspective, Anthony Stabley, our production designer, they were building in these oxidized, rusty, make you want a tetanus shot kind of environments. We brought in the chains and the like fencing, and like those were staple pieces, and those are staple things we looked at. For us, Saw was, light. It's darkness where light's poking into the darkness. It's light embedded in darkness. So we're using practical lighting. There's a roughness to it. This film moves from a more dramatic space into more of a horror space. So we do start with a lighter, more like as saccharine as Saw gets. It's still got a look. It's still got a style. It's very pushed, but it's still contrasty. There's always deep blacks in the movie, but it doesn't necessarily, there's more of a Rembrandt wrapping light. There's more beauty to it. And then as the movie gets more brutal and the twists start to unfold and the traps start to happen, we take all the colors we set up in the abduction scenes and the beginning of the movie, and we play those out in their most heightened, extravagant form. So that's on the lighting side. From the camera side, we were not able to shoot 35 millimeter, which is what they shot those early films. But what I did was I used these Cook Eye Classic Panchros, which are modern lenses, and then they have like modern, housings, modern everything, but they're designed to look like vintage lenses in terms of the way the glass reads the world. So you have a softness to them, you have fall off on the edges, you have, all of these vintage characteristics. And then on top of that, we used filtration in front of the lens. We used a pearlescent one in order to break the image up, soften it up, and take away from this sort of digital, sort of tone. And then additionally, we shot at a high ASA. So most of the movie was shot at 2000 ASA. Now, the Venice is technically a 500 ASA, 2500 ASA camera. So technically, we're gained down a little from that, just to give us a little bit of a safety stop. But I wanted to start from a place where we were already baking some grain into the film. We added more grain in post. we didn't want to go so far because we knew we couldn't do a film out. And ultimately adding grain in post, it can feel very digital and it can be wrong if you go too far. I wanted to film out. I pushed to shoot on 8mm for some of the traps to really bring in a gritty aesthetic, but ultimately we ended up shooting on the Venice. And then I also had a Blackmagic 6K pocket camera that I just, I purchased it for a Spoonful of Sugar to give Mercedes a second camera on that movie. And then I was like, this is going to be my cinematic GoPro that I take around with me and shoot stuff. And so there's actually some pretty important shots in the movie that end up on that Blackmagic. One of which is, there's a certain trap that places someone under a waterfall of blood. And I'll just say that is hopefully not spoilery. And the camera's right here on the person. And that's my Blackmagic rigged onto this, thing. And we're doing stuff like in the brain surgery trap, which is in the trailer. And there's, I'm using lens whacking and shooting at 6 frames a second. And I'm doing low shutter speed. And that's to create kind of those film rollout sort of looks. So the light bleed happens, and because Kevin directed and cut the movie, he was able to cut those pieces in. Where additionally, we brought back the circular dolly track. We wanted to bring that in and just be like, fuck you, it's Saw. Like, we love that stuff. Yeah, we're just like, this is fun. Like the traps open and we do snap zooms where it's like, it starts on a character and then it snaps back. And it's very giallo, it's very heightened. I think of Saw sort of as like 7 by way of a new metal music video. So the whole thing is like exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, reveal of information, and there's, I think we have some really, like, for instance, there's an abduction sequence. I won't give away which character that just, I think we nailed a very giallo sort of like sequence with this one specifically that happens in a house where there's a lot of lighting cues and reveals of characters and things. And I think so for us, it was like, let's take what makes the original Saw great and these other films great. What do fans love about them? What do we love about them? The griminess, the grit, the texture. We loved that they sort of go for broke with the camera movement, that there's no they're not just sitting. The movies don't sit around. And in this movie, there's 4,000 cuts. I mean, there's, or over that. So it really is about crafting a visual language that just keeps the audience perpetually moving forward, guessing what's going to happen next. And then additionally, we shot in a 1:8:5 aspect ratio because I wanted this to feel like a bridge between Saw 1 and Saw 2. I think one of the big concerns or questions in that was also like, okay, our actors are 20 years older, and I was just like, we just have to accept it. Like, we're not going to make deep fake. People will accept that these actors are older, because every time I went in and tried to clean up the light to glamorize them and make them look younger, it didn't feel like a Saw movie.
Yeah, and I did want to ask, because the movie does focus a lot on John Kramer in a more intimate light than I think pretty much any of the other movies did. And I just was wondering how that affected your work in going from that to, the traps and the gore.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think because we wanted to tell, we were nervous that fans wouldn't want to stick through the drama, frankly. There's Saw traditionally has like an opening trap that's tends to not be related to the rest of the movie. We sort of found a different way to work that into this film. But in general, we were hoping that the strength of Tobin Bell as a performer, that the intrigue around his story, and then also that we were telling a very emotional human story about somebody who is dying of cancer and looking for any possible hope, and a way out. We were hoping that would be enough to carry the audience forward. So I think we did approach shooting the early sequences, in the beginning of the film, the movie starts in the US. So we took a very like steely blues, grays, whites, sort of a monochromatic bluish sort of tones to reflect John's world. He's dying of cancer. He's sick in the face. There's a whitishness to his skin tone even. And we wanted to shoot it in a more traditional character drama. And also, like, there's a lot of intimate close-ups where we end up, like, right in John's face, where it's eyes to mouth. And I think for us, it was, let's trust the strength of Tobin Bell as a performer. Let's trust we got very lucky. I mean, most of the Saw films have not had nearly the strength of performers we've had. We had fantastic cast. And so I think, we shot the beginning more as a traditional drama. Then we move into Mexico. We do go for this like jaundice yellow. We knew people would call it out and people would say, oh, the yellow filter. But we were like, look, do we establish we're like, we want Mexico to feel golden. We want it to feel rich and lush with green and red. And then when this, this sort of twist happens and we start to end up seeing these abductions and the scams and the traps, then we're going into a heightened color palette where everything is starting to be a little more punchy. The color, the yellows turn from being gold to more jaundiced. The greens start to take more precedence. The reds start to come alive, and so then I'm taking those sort of colors, I'm playing them in the abduction scenes, knowing that I'm going to take those same color palettes and amp them up in the trap sequences. So I think the beginning it's brighter, it's more filled in, there's more of a lushness to it. And it's, it's shot in a little bit. It doesn't make sense to do like big snap zooms and big push. The traps sort of create the environment to let us get away with that kind of heightened language, that really expressive language. So that's kind of, approach wise, sort of what we did. And the beginning of the movie is more like sticks and dolly, and steady cam. And then actually as the traps start, we move into more like handheld intercut with techno crane and handheld intercut with, so it's very like, gritty in the moment. And then boom, like it's this crazy like techno crane shot or zoom shot or whatever like that.
Cool. We are all out of time for this morning, but before we go, what do you got coming up? What's next for Nick Matthews?
Yeah, so I'm getting ready to do color on this film I brought up earlier. It's called Bone Lake. It's produced by this company called LD Entertainment that did stuff like Jackie, and they just sold a movie called The Cursed to Neon. They do really fantastic work. They were super supportive of our creative process, and I can't wait to color that film. Then, the actor strike's still ongoing, so I don't know what my next feature will be, but I hope it's something that gives me an opportunity to do some really exciting visual world building and take people on another journey that's, just as dark and weird as Saw X.
Where can people catch up with you to keep track of you? Are you on the socials? So when you do know what's next, it'll be announced there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can follow along. I'm on Instagram at Nick Matthews Film, and feel free to hit me up, ask me questions. I'm come from a background where I didn't have access to a lot of people or resources as I was learning how to be a cinematographer. So I genuinely do like sharing that information with people who are up and coming and people who are figuring it out on their own. So please do hit me up, ask questions. I'm very happy to answer them and share about my process. And hopefully it leads to other people making more provocative and challenging work on their own. And I just can't wait to see what all of you guys make.
Well, cool. Thank you for joining us this morning. As far as we go, you can find Eye on Horror on any of the socials under Eye on Horror or at iHorror.com, which is a site we call home. Our theme music is by Restless Spirit. They have a new record out, After Image. You gotten it, Korea?
I have the record ordered, yeah, and they put some of their tour shirts online.
Restless Spirit, After Image. It's out now. Our artwork is by Chris Fisher, so go give him a like. And go see Saw X with Nick Matthews, cinematographer. And thanks for joining us again. And we will see you all in a couple of weeks. So for me, James J. Edwards.
I'm Jacob Davison.
I'm Jonathan Korea.
I'm Nick Matthews.
Keep your eye on horror.